Okay, so we're going to talk all things cybersecurity now, and I am delighted to welcome now to the stage Andre McGregor. He is partner and global head of security, and he's a veteran FBI cybersecurity agent, although he really doesn't look old enough. So please put your hands together and welcome Andre.
All right, thank you very much for having me here. As mentioned, I'm Global Head of Security at TLDR, which is a blockchain ICO investment and advisory firm leading up the security practice over there. So all things blockchain as it relates to security. But more importantly, I spent a good deal of my time, while I do look young, at the FBI as a special agent in cyber division. I got to work some very interesting cases. It was sort of a time back in 2009 when hacking was finally getting to be a bit more public, and they pulled a bunch of us from the field with technical backgrounds and said, go chase China. And then they gave us Iran, and then they gave us Russia, and after a while we were quite interesting bunch of agents that were able to take down a good amount of adversaries. But additionally to that, spent a good amount of time doing critical infrastructure protection, as well as the FBI cyber liaison to the United Nations out in New York and in Washington, D.C. But all of that is great, but more than people tend to like the TV show Mr. Robot, and I got to, the opportunity to really take that skill set and show it on television and be able to work on hacks and do so in 42 minutes. So for those who have not seen Mr. Robot, I will give a 2-minute primer to catch people up.
Corp, you have been owned. We at F Society will smile as we watch you and your dark soul die.
USA Network's Mr. Robot is groundbreaking television with cutting-edge storylines, detailed world building, and uncanny parallels to current events.
Certainly a subject matter that has become more and more relevant as the year has gone on.
Markets in Asia and Europe are tumbling dramatically. Numerous governments in the European Union are now in a free-for-all.
So this is what a revolution looks like. A simple program, a worm that can make data unreadable. Is that really all it takes to kill the world?
But could the F Society hack portrayed in the show actually happen? What would the fallout of such a hack look like?
So we have plenty of companies that kind of fall into that too big to fail moniker. It's kind of scary to think about what the impact of a destructive hack against them could have on society.
You could wreck large sectors of the power grid. You could take down a whole bank. You could do a lot of damage.
There are some key vulnerabilities within our national infrastructure. People could actually take the entire internet down.
A lone hacker really can do immense damage, or they can do immense good. It's just all in the motivation.
The single biggest incident of wealth redistribution in history.
This is it. Time to shut them down.
Their networks are getting attacked.
$13 billion, that's exactly how much they've lost.
Who did this? Every record gone. One guy, the whole thing comes down.
Oh, hi.
Elliot, just a tad.
All right. For those that have not watched Mr. Robot, I encourage you to do so. We are on season 4, which is also our final season, and it's a great show to binge watch. What's great about Mr. Robot is what's great about an event like this, which is the fact that technology has become great. If you look at some of the stats, you see that we're obviously growing as a population, but we are also growing exponentially in how we use the internet. And so, of course, there's a lot of opportunities that go along with that. And you look and you see some of the ways that we are connecting through social media, through online activity, and you realize that we do a lot on the internet every single minute. And actually, I don't know if this video is going to play. I don't know if the audio people can click the play button. But what's interesting is when you look at technology, we've consolidated a lot in a short amount of time. It's pretty impressive what we're able to do now on a mobile phone. It's pretty impressive what we're able to do on our MacBook that we no longer had to do manually even 10 years ago. But unfortunately, the life that I lead really shows sort of the bad stuff that seems to happen with attacks. I always make it a point that whatever country I present in, I don't talk about the bad stuff that's happening in that country. So we're picking on the United States today. A lot of hacking from adversaries around the world, whether it's for financial gain, for terrorism, or for destruction. Though I am going to pick on British Airways because I did fly in and purchase a ticket, and they got hacked. And this notification came to me a couple days ago. So I applaud GDPR, I applaud e-privacy for requiring notification. I don't applaud BA for still allowing for data to be exploited and notifications like this. What's interesting, though, is when we look back in time, we notice that there are a couple really big hacks where we lost a lot of data and a lot of little bubbles that seem important for specific individuals, but not towards the greater population. Though when we expand and we look towards 2017, we see a lot more bigger bubbles. So we're still not getting better, we're just losing lots and lots more data. So I decided to do some stats to show sort of a difference between 2015 and 2017, 2018. I always show where I'm getting the stats so we can avoid things like fake news, as we like to say in my country. So if we look at just something as simple as malware on websites, you can see that in 2014, 1 in 1,126 websites had malware. Now it's 1 in 13. The other thing that's very interesting is there's an 80% increase in malware on Macs. Most people think Macs or iPhones are immune to malware. What's interesting about it, though, is that I can make assumptions about a person based off of the fact that they have a Mac or they have an iPhone. I can make an assumption that they have money or access to money, or they are connected to a company that has access to money. Just by that, now I'm no longer targeting people hoping to get a click that'll get me a little bit of money, but instead if I can target someone that has infrastructure behind them that has a lot of money, it's greater gain. Looking at mobile malware. So back in 2014, 168 variants of malware. Now there's 27,000. What's interesting, though, is if you look at the apps that are most likely to have malicious mobile malware, it's lifestyle and music and audio. So essentially, they target those apps because we're cavalier about them. So we're not thinking necessarily about security when we're getting access to apps that will help us sort of move through our day or give us entertainment. It's interesting because that over time has always been the case. If we look at malware back in the early 2000s, actually a lot of it was targeting video game websites. There was celebrity gossip websites as well, mainly because the people that went to those websites did not really understand security or care about security the way that some other business individuals would. Unfortunately, as we move into IoT, we have a lot more attacks against the devices of Internet of Things, and there's actually no stats from 2014 because it was not really a thing 2014. And where are the attacks coming from? Show me a place that has a lot of developers, and I'll show you where they're actually attacking us. And while I'd like to say that the United States is not hacking, I also like to say the UK is not hacking. We are, they are, you are, because every country is. And it's just very interesting to look at the fact that there's some sort of gain for every country to be able to implement hacking. You look at a country like Uganda, they actually just added $300,000 to a cyber program to do hacking because they too want to know what their neighbors are doing. And if we actually look at targeted attacks, what's interesting about these statistics is the fact that yes, there is a financial gain, that people are still trying to get money, but it's very, very little. What they're trying to do is get intelligence or information. So you may get hacked and never know about it because they got everything they needed and they left. No longer are they sort of just leaving remnants behind and keeping a footprint. They're actually just smash and grab and leaving. What's interesting also about the top 10 countries that are affected by targeted attacks, Brunei is part of that list. When you start to look back and peel back the onion as to why you're being hacked, that's the way to sort of understand what information they're going after and therefore what you need to protect. In a targeted attack, yes, spear phishing is 71% for emails that you get that has a malicious attachment or a malicious link. However, that's a targeted attack. If I'm just sort of sending an email out to everyone in this room, it's still a 95% vector for intrusions. The other 4% is what we call a drive-by download, or what they call a watering hole, where you go to a website, there's malware, it just automatically installs based off of the vulnerabilities on your computer. But the reason for that is because we all have business needs, and so email is it. It's always going to be open. So how does this happen? I was going to show a few hacks from Mr. Robot. We have dozens of hacks that we show. It's interesting because we have to show it in a way that is appealing to technophiles that want to pause the screen and look at our code and see if there's an errant semicolon or an extra space, but also the spouses and partners of those people that care absolutely nothing about technology, but like, Christian Slater and Rami Malek, and need to have some sort of drama in their life. So a few hacks that we're going to show real quickly is a password cracker that Elliot uses. Also a CD that has a remote access Trojan on it to be able to spy using a webcam. Hiding encrypted data in a file using steganography. Using a rat to exploit an Android phone. Taking a badge and making a copy of it so you can use that to gain access to a building. And then some social engineering that we use around Steel Mountain, which is where data is stored, almost like a data center, along with the USBs that are sprinkled in a parking lot, and Elliot hacks into a prison. So essentially, we have these things called password crackers. The idea around them is at a certain point in time, if you have a password that's under 12 characters, there's probably a rainbow table around that's already figured out what your password is. Or if you created it yourself, humans are very, very, very predictable. So I can say, all right, I'm sure that the first character is capitalized, the last character is a special character, that special character is probably an exclamation point, and if I force you to have a number, it's going to be second to last. A lot of things that are predictable. Being able, remote access Trojans, that's something where if I install it on your machine, I have access. Just as though I was on that machine. In this particular case, he's using it to access the webcam and be able to see what's going on. So if you don't have a privacy slider on your webcam, you really, really should. Additionally, the idea around steganography, which started, unfortunately, with child exploitation, hiding pictures into other pictures, is being used to hide other information. But the idea is that you have a file that's 1 megabyte. I'm going to hide stuff around it, behind it. It may now look like it's still a regular picture, like a Monet, when in fact it's a large Word document that has a bunch more information behind it. Androids are obviously more susceptible to kernel exploitation than iPhones. So when you actually get that update that says, hey, do you want to allow for super access or root access, sometimes you wonder whether or not it's actually legitimate or not. And then, of course, many, many people leave their badges out as they're walking. Someone can just brush up against you, scan it, take the information that's on it, whether it's 18 or 24 bits, copy that, use that to get into facilities or purport to be you in order to gain access somewhere else. The idea around it is I'm socially engineering myself into your life or your business by exploiting you and your weaknesses, which is unfortunate because it means that you have to think about all the different ways that the adversary is going to come after you. In this unfortunate situation, we were able to target a specific individual on the show, be able to allow for him to feel comforted that we all work together, and then use that as a way to get into secure spaces, and then use a Raspberry Pi actually to be able to exploit a system in the spot. It's actually a really good scene that we set up towards the end of season 1. This one in particular is just using an SMS attack to let someone know that they have some sort of medical issue and they need to leave, and that allowed for us to get in, or Rami's character. And then, of course, USBs, of course, we talk about how bad they are. They can be bad if you do not put in proper protections. So the idea there is know what you're plugging in before you actually plug it in, because they actually ran a test where they do in the government facilities a lot, where they just sort of sprinkle USBs around in the parking lot. People want to be helpful. They plug it into a machine, and then there you go. It allows access to come into the system. So there's a lot of ways to get into systems and to be able to exploit those. And there's a lot of adversaries that are trying to leverage that. So who are the cyber attackers around? We have hacktivists is a group. Criminals, of course, for financial gain. The ubiquitous insider, whether it's witting or unwitting. There's this sort of the cyber spy, or someone that's trying to commit espionage. Then there's the cyber terrorists, and those that are obviously waging war or supporting the war effort for their country. We actually call cyber terrorists unicorns because we talk about them, but we never actually find one. We did find one not too long ago, but for the most part, they have a very hard time building bombs. It's also very hard for them to create malware and spread it. So hacktivists, they hack for social good, social justice, or at least in their eyes they do that. So Mr. Robot would fall into that category. One of the things that was interesting when we were having ISIS hacking websites, they were being hacked back, and then a pride flag was replacing their website. So it was very interesting when you take some of their efforts and put it out on the internet. Of course, cyber criminals, there's always going to be a financial gain that's associated. And then, of course, the insider, which is very, very, very hard to find because they have they have controls, but they're already in a trusted zone. So what's interesting is that the insider, sometimes, yes, they are malicious and their idea is to steal data or cause destruction, but many of us have access and we become the insiders ourselves without even knowing it. So if you look at the Verizon data breach report and you took 2,000 confirmed breaches, 50% of emails phishing emails were clicked within the first hour. We love clicking things. And then, of course, if that email is looked to be like from our boss or our partner or our admin, we're going to click it even faster. 60% of the cases, the attacker were able to compromise organizations within minutes. Had an awesome conversation with my colleagues over at NSA, and I said, hey, based off of what you guys do, if I gave you a computer system and I asked you how long it would take to get into that system, what would that be? And he said, do we know the IP address of the system? I said, yes. He's like, 5 minutes. So, think what other countries are doing. 99.9% of vulnerabilities have been exposed already for a year. So it's not like they're doing 0-day vulnerabilities that you hear about. It's stuff that you should have been patching already, or stuff that could have been patched and wasn't, that's being exploited. 70-90% of malware samples are unique, which makes it hard to scan for those. So unfortunately, your antivirus is not going to be as good as patching your systems. And then, of course, 60% of incidents were attributed to errors by system administrators. So we're just not doing our job properly as IT guys and security guys, and therefore those are being exploited. Cyber spy, China is our cyber spy as a Western interest. Obviously, we work well with them, but really their plan is how do we actually build up our military? This aircraft carrier is the key to what they've been doing for a very, very long time. The global dominance that the US has is by its 17 aircraft carriers that they have around the world and can position people within hours. China can do that too now. People have asked me sort of on a scale, what's everyone's sort of skill set? ISIS, they're a little low. Iran, you keep kind of moving up. You see North Korea, China. Russia's really good. They're really, really good. And then there's two little dots that I add. I don't put words next to them, but the two little dots. The dot below the top dot is Israel, and the button at the top is the United States. Terrorism. This is an interesting slide, just because if you look specifically, Iran in 2010 was really, really bad at doing cyber attacks. And then in a 5-year span, they were able, or 7-year span, they're actually a very, very good adversary against Western interests on cyber. North Korea only took 2 years to do exactly the same. So we're just getting better because technology is getting easier to exploit. And then you look at some of the stuff that they want to wage war against Western interests. This was one of my cases. Iran hacked a water dam up in New York. We ended up indicting the government of Iran for that. But it was just an interesting case because that was a moment where they went from sort of just simple cyber attacks to actually trying to cause damage. But at the end of the day, you look at all the attackers and you realize that it really just comes down to three areas. Either you're targeted, and if you're targeted, you're always going to be targeted. Opportunistic, where it just happened to be that you had something open or exploited, or I sent out a bunch of phishing emails and 1% of the people clicked it, or the insiders, which is, as I said, really, really hard to find. So a very telling quote is from the NSA's chief of TAO, which is Tailored Access Organization, which we never talked about until recently, but they've recently exposed themselves. But essentially, they know the network that they're targeting better than the people that are on that network, and they're always surprised to find things that people don't realize is running on that network. At the end of the day, what do we do? So the NCSC here in the UK and Dr. Ian Levy is probably one of the smartest people that I know in cybersecurity, period, and the smartest person I know cybersecurity in government. And so if you haven't visited their website, they have very good information about individuals and how they should be protecting themselves, small, medium-sized, and enterprise businesses. Anytime there's some sort of large-scale attack, they put out notifications. The United States government, every government should be doing what the UK NCSC is doing. So if you haven't had the time to actually explore this, it gives you some very, very good insights as to what you should be doing. And now, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up blockchain. At the end of the day, we all sort of realize that there's a Bitcoin aspect, there's a currency aspect around it, which is the decentralized nature of a stored value. But really, it's all the other stuff that we can do with blockchain. It's the immutable data, moving away from databases that can be hacked, being able to connect in other ways that doesn't require sort of a centralized server or centralized environment, getting the opportunity right now to work helping voting on the blockchain, and there's a couple elections that are coming up, and being able to vote from a mobile phone and other stuff that is taking some time to get there, but we're doing it. So I'll pause there. I really like this cartoon because it's true. No one's actually robbing a bank anymore. If anyone's ever wondered how much money people get from a bank robbery, if there is not an insider, and if it's just someone with a gun walking into a bank, no more than $3,000. Like they don't put money out there anymore. If any more money is taken, it's usually an insider realizing the time in which they're robbing the bank. So it's not really lucrative anymore to rob a bank with a gun. It's much easier to do it online. So I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. Wonderful. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. Let's just see if there are any questions that have come up via Slido, or if anybody has questions out there the old-fashioned way, then do stick your hand up for me. Okay, so nothing on Slido. Do please keep using it. It's a really useful tool. I think many of us might be absolutely terrified after what we've seen and heard from you. So what do we all need to do to protect ourselves?
It's not sexy, but it is patching. I know a lot of people sort of click remind me later, or when Mac comes up and says, need to restart, they say remind me tomorrow. Or if you are like me and you have lots and lots of tabs in Google Chrome and you never close them, Google Chrome does a really good job of updating, but you actually have to restart the browser to actually get those updates. So if you don't actually do that, then you can be exploited.
Okay, and so it's only going to get worse, isn't it? So what as retailers do we need to do, apart from everything that you've talked about there, to get on top of it? Because I think there's so much, and there's so much that you know.
No, I think at the end of the day, there's two sides of security. There's just the device or the system itself and what can be attacked. So obviously understanding all the vectors around it, whether it's a mobile device or a camera system or a scanner, and then there's the users attached to it. So I'm sure everyone is tired of hearing about two-factor authentication. It works, but it also doesn't work. So the interesting thing about two-factor where it doesn't work is if someone asks you for an SMS text, a big scam that's been going around right now is going into your cell carrier's store, making a fake ID, and saying, hey, I want to switch my phone over to this other iPhone. And because it's just a simple transfer, it's not porting it over from AT&T to Vodafone, it's just moving it from one phone to the other, they don't really ask for any additional ID. So what ends up happening is that phone number gets transferred over. I immediately go to Gmail, and I can make assumptions about most people and their Gmail accounts, probably first name dot last name or first name dot initial dot last name, or a variety of combinations. And from there, I go to password recovery, and it says send me an SMS text. I now have a phone, I get the SMS text, 6-digit, I put it in, I reset the password, I'm now in your Gmail account. And then from there, I go into your LinkedIn account, I go into your Facebook account, I go into your bank accounts, I keep doing password recoveries, I keep going in, all of a sudden I've taken your money, I've taken your identity, and I've hijacked your phone. You realize when you wake up in the morning that your phone doesn't work because I've now taken that activity, that phone number away, and you call, and they say, oh no, you're not who you say you are. Like, no, it is my phone. It's like, oh no, someone changed the PIN, and now I have difficulties getting my phone back. And once I do, I have to now go back and try to get all of those accounts, which can take hours, days, and sometimes weeks. And so that's a really big scam that's going on. Unfortunately, people think that they have a PIN on their account, but many times it's what we call a carrier PIN and not a security PIN. So the carrier PIN is a industry agreement that says, hey, if I'm AT&T, and I want to port a number over to Vodafone, I will have a PIN that I can say I've confirmed on my AT&T site who this person is, so that when Vodafone gets the other phone call, they say, oh, you are who you say you are. It has nothing to do with security. So you have to actually reach out to your carrier and say, I want a security PIN, so that when anyone does go into the store or anyone does call up, they actually are blocked and they're not using this carrier PIN that's out there.
Oh my God, that's completely terrifying.
I'm sorry. I've been dealing with a hack a week from executives.
Yeah.
Yes, and
okay,
actually, if you're following the news, there's a big $200 million lawsuit that is against AT&T for an executive that lost, I think, $20 million in Bitcoin because of this. So, yeah.
Wow, Andre, look, the questions are coming in thick and fast, so you can see the top two favorite ones there. So is blockchain hackable? Let's kick off with that one.
Good question. Blockchain, as it stands right now, for the more prominent protocols, is not hackable. The person's hackable. So again, we still suffer from the same security problems that we have, which is I need to protect my development staff, I need to protect my executives, and I need to protect my infrastructure. Because yes, while I can have something written to the blockchain and it is immutable, it will not change, I need to protect the vectors in which that data is actually put onto the blockchain, because you can still have bad data. We call it in tech garbage in, garbage out.
Okay, all right, thank you. And you can see the next one there. So let's get your thoughts on the Russian hacking interference during the US election.
It's an interesting situation because I think, at least from the US perspective, we can agree in cybersecurity. We can also agree in the US intelligence industry or community that there was Russian interference. This is the one time that I've noticed that we actually are not seeing hacking as victimless. Many times you get hacked, you lose money, but the bank makes you whole again. So you don't really think about it. You're like, oh, I got to get a new card. I got to change my direct deposit, but otherwise it's fine. But once it touches you, once you feel like you've been hurt, now people are screaming at the top of their lungs, rightfully so, and hopefully that's allowing us to have better security as a result.
Okay, all right, let's have one more then. So, your journey to where you are has been quite incredible, hasn't it? So in a nutshell, how did you get into it? Was it something you were always intrigued by?
No, actually. So I'm a computer engineer, and then one day I get a phone call that says, hey, we're the FBI, we want you to come and take a test. And I said, no.
Did you say?
I said no.
Are you for real?
No, I didn't say. I just said I'm good. And they're like, no, really, we're the FBI. And I said, no, really, I'm good. And they're like, no, come in. So I was like, okay. I took the test, and I actually really enjoyed the test. It was a logic test about the day in the life of an agent. So then I took a couple more tests, and then they gave me the physical fitness test, which is push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and running, and I failed because I have soft hands. And so I was like, I'm not going to let the FBI beat me. I want to do this. So I kept going. I finally passed, and then I got to the polygraph, which is the worst experience of my life. 3.5 hours of being strapped to a box where they ask you questions about, your personal life,
yes.
Whether or not you're connected to crime or terrorism, things like, have you ever been drunk? And then you say yes, and then they completely go off on you for being a bad person, when in fact everyone has that answer. And then they take you to Quantico, teach you to shoot a gun, take a punch, and then they put me in New York. I worked counterterrorism for a little bit. I worked Italian organized crime, so Gambino, Lucchese, Bonanno crime families, up until they said, we want to build a cybersecurity squad, and there we go.
And here you are, amazing. And I think we've all really enjoyed your story, and thank you so much for sharing everything. Everybody, Andre.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. See you.